Welcome to another episode of Seaview Circle. This is our review recap podcast where we discuss our favorite TV series and movies of the past, present, and possibly the future, and in the process chat about styles, fashions, and locations often lost to the decades. We do all of this in service of our end goal of determining just how highbrow or lowbrow our viewing taste is. We are getting close to the end of the first season here. Not only the first season of Knots Landing, but also the first season of this podcast. Only a couple episodes left.
That's amazing.
What are we discussing today, Doug?
Well, today's episode is called Small Surprises. It originally aired on CBS on March 6th, 1980.
Now, of course, you can watch this now on Plex.tv, along with 343 other episodes of Knots Landing. Now, I heard that over on Access Hollywood this past week, that the ladies of Knots Landing, Joan Van Ark, Donna Mills, and Michele Lee, were all on the show talking about how Knots Landing is now available to stream on Plex.
Yes.
We have not seen it yet.
We haven't seen it yet. I saw a couple photos on Instagram,
We do record this in advance if you didn't know, so possibly.
I saw it on the Donna Mills Instagram. I saw a photograph.
Hopefully somebody's going to put up the clip so we can see the whole thing. But we're just excited that the ladies are excited as well that Knots Landing is now available for everybody to stream.
We're going to get to the episode in a second. But first, we have a letter from the SAC.
Yes. Well, actually, first I wanted to just say that we've gotten a lot of really nice comments on our YouTube and over on Instagram, just thanking us for recent episodes. We want to give a shout out to Stephanie in Chicago and also Dominique in France, who are always leaving us wonderful comments. And we apologize if we don't respond to them quickly enough, because we usually only update like the YouTube once a week when we upload the video. So we'll try to be better at responding quicker. We did get a fantastic little letter from the SAC in the mail. This is a book that has been made by Diane Letellier. You may know her from the Facebook group, the Knots Landing Chronicles. This is her cookbook. It's called Knots Landing Recipes and Memories. So we want to give a shout out to Diane. Thank you for sending us this. We are hoping to perhaps maybe use something out of this for upcoming Thanksgiving dinner.
For Thanksgiving, I think we're going to cook something from this cookbook.
And maybe we're going to have Diane on our show eventually, hopefully, to talk more about it. But it's a really fun little book that has recipes that are inspired by, certain episodes of the show, or the recipes that have actually been sent to Diane by cast members.
Ooh, that could be fun.
Knots Landing. So we're really looking forward to getting into this. I think the thing that I want to try is Valeen's apple fritters.
Oh, I think that would be good for Thanksgiving for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe like dessert.
Just so you guys know, when we did that little watch along for Land of the Free, and I said I had Valeen's fritters, 45 years old sitting around, those were actually from our Winchell's.
Oh, okay. Then maybe what we could do too is, does anybody in that book, did anybody make a turducken?
There is no
There's
turducken.
No Valeen's turducken.
There's no Valeen's turducken.
All right.
But trust me, I've never tried one. Have you?
I've not tried a turducken. I don't think I want to try a turducken.
What about the Ewing Texas chili? We're just going to zoom in on that,
Okay. All right. Well, maybe we could try that one
anyway,
later.
Thank you very much, Diane. Thank you for all the hard work you do over at the Facebook group as well, Knots Landing Chronicles. And we look forward to hopefully speaking to you about this in a future episode in greater depth. Now, if you would like to send us a message, you may do so. Or, hey, listen, we're also open to accepting other books, such as The Saga of Seaview Circle by Laura Van Wormer. We're looking for it.
I keep seeing that one popping up all over the place.
Yeah.
Like people saying, I finally got a copy of this rare book.
I know. We want to add it to our Knots library. So if you would like to send us a message, you may do so over at Gmail. That is seeviewcircle@gmail.com.
You can also reach us on Instagram, which is at seeviewcircle, and that's spelled S-E-E, View Circle, all one word. But now, let's get back to the episode.
Let's do it.
So the writer of this episode, again, is Rob Gilmer. This is his fourth episode writing for Knots, and the second one in a row now that we're looking at.
Okay.
And the synopsis from IMDb is as follows. Karen discovers that she's pregnant and can't decide if she's delighted or devastated.
The director of this episode is Nicholas Segarro. This is the second episode that he's directed. If you remember, he is, I think, if he's not the most prolific, he's one of the most prolific Knots Landing directors, and he does direct at least one episode in every season. The last one he worked on was Land of the Free, which we just discussed.
Right, the Watchalong.
Yeah, so I'll be interested to see if we can determine any connections here between those two episodes in that directing style.
I'm excited. Let's get going.
Do you have any notes about the intro here?
The only thing I wrote was, wow, it's going to be a doozy.
Yeah, the music was so intense, and really pretty much all we saw was Karen and Sid fighting, and it really reminded me of that kind of high drama from the pilot episode.
Yeah. Our scene opens with a plaque on a door that says Louise Bender, obstetrician. So we know something's up. And then we see Karen sitting down reading Glamour magazine.
Ding, ding, ding. The redometer already goes off.
Yes.
She is wearing the exact same shirt that she wore in episode 3 with David Crane, and also again at Knots Landing Motors when Lucy was coming to town, and she is wearing it again here.
Mrs. Klinger is called. Who's Mrs. Klinger?
How do you remember these things?
I don't know. I just thought that was really weird. I was like, oh, okay, Mrs. Klinger. But then pretty quickly they call in Karen Fairgate.
And you can see that she's nervous, right? She's in the waiting room, and she's kind of, she almost doesn't want to go in, right? So when the first person's called, she's relieved, but then she's called into the doctor's office right after that. We follow into the doctor's office, and it is her obstetrician, and she is confirming Karen's suspicion.
Yes. So
Karen, she is pregnant.
Karen already knew. So the question is, are congratulations in order?
Right.
And that's kind of where the whole episode begins.
The doctor can see that there is definitely some stress in Karen's reaction to this news. And Karen is, I don't know if it's told at that point how old she is, but she is concerned that maybe she is too old to bring this baby to term. And she asks if there are any health issues or health concerns in regards to being pregnant at this age, and also whether or not there's a higher risk of miscarriage.
Yeah, they do reveal later that she was 37. So, that's, I guess, pretty valid. I mean, we've had several friends who've had kids in their
early
30s or even early 40s. Yeah. But yeah, obviously.
My mother had me when she was 35. So, and I remember at that time, at school, I knew that my mother was a little bit older than a lot of the other mothers. So obviously this would have been a concern, and we're going to see where it takes Karen on this journey. The doctor does say that she has options, right?
Yeah.
She says, why don't you think it over, and then you can see me in a week and we can decide how to proceed. Did you notice the macrame wall hanging in the office? I don't know if it was actually moved from the waiting room, and then it was also in the office.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
There's this big, shaggy macrame thing that, one of these carpet kind of wall hanging things you would see at that era, and I loved it. I kind of wish we had one in here, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, listen, if anybody out there watching, if you see one, that's good. Let us know. So we're back at the cul-de-sac. We see Eric riding his bicycle up to Ginger's house, and Ginger has a young woman there, and we find out that this is her sister Jill, who was spoken about a few episodes ago.
This is the one the younger sister that Ginger wanted to introduce Eric to, because she could tell that Eric kind of had a crush on her.
Yes, and then pretty quickly you can see they're introduced, and there's definitely some smiles going on between both of them, and you're like, oh, this is good. This is
what I thought was really sweet about this was, all the incidents of the last episode, right, with Ginger being potentially stalked by all these different male admirers, right? That's what we thought at the beginning. Almost immediately you can tell that all of our concern of whether or not Eric was one of those people is just instantly put to rest, because he's a kid, he's way out of Ginger's league. And actually, it looks like he's out of Jill's league as well.
Yeah, even though Jill, I think, is supposed to be 14.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of remember. 14 and he's 15.
Right.
Well, anyway, they start speaking, and he shows that that's my house over there. She sees the basketball hoop, and she's like, oh, why don't we shoot a few hoops? So I was like, oh, that's cool. She's kind of tomboyish.
And Eric's kind of taken aback by that. He's like, oh, you want to play basketball? Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, so then we move on over to that. They start shooting hoops, and at first, Eric is not very aggressive. It's like he's scared to play her because
she's a girl,
and he doesn't want to maybe touch her on accident. So he's very...
Or be too rough, right?
Yeah, very careful.
Not to be physical. Not to be physical.
Yeah, you don't want to be physical.
I love the shirt that she's wearing. Did you notice it was like a yellow, sweatshirt or whatever? There's a bunch of little cows on it. I thought it looked very early 80s.
So at one point while they're playing basketball, she's just like, listen, forget that I'm a girl.
Yeah,
and
if you want to play.
Yeah, if you want to play, let's play. So they start playing for real, and then I think
she takes a little tumble.
Yeah, she takes a tumble, and he kind of is on her a little bit. So it's cute. And then, of course, in comes the station wagon.
Right.
Karen, and
she doesn't even register.
Right, she's oblivious to the fact they're playing basketball.
So they both just say, he's like, Mom, we're playing basketball. And I think Laura and Val are also coming up. They've come back from grocery shopping, and they also have to say to Karen, look, they're playing basketball on the driveway.
Yeah, so clearly Karen is rattled. She's just kind of like in la la land.
Right.
Hey, listen, I can relate to that.
She gets out of the car, and then I think Val says, oh, she's really cute. And Karen's like, who? And she's like, the girl that Eric is playing basketball with. Doesn't even register. And then Laura says some little joke like, oh, isn't it cute? Today, basketball. Tomorrow, who knows?
And then she goes, what is that supposed to mean? Or something
She's
like,
Laura, don't joke about things like that.
It's like, what? So, and they even say something like, Wagga, what's that all
up with
about?
her?
So it's like...
So Karen follows into the house. She is still very distracted, but she does hear Diana calling her from her bedroom. So she goes to the bedroom, and there's a great kind of shot that pans across Diana's room, and it's just strewn about are all these toys and so
stuffed
many
animals again.
Toys.
Remember, she has that. It's those weird stuffed animals above the headboard or whatever. They're all like stuck on the wall.
And did you notice a certain doll in the background?
Oh, was it that doll again?
The one? Bradley doll.
Oh, I didn't see
Lucy's Bradley doll was in Diana's room.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay.
That is a prop, usage of a prop in a later episode in a different scene. Now, could you say that maybe Lucy left that doll behind when she went back to Dallas? I suppose
maybe she did. She didn't really want
I mean, it's so distinctive, right? So Diana's like, yeah, Mom, I really could use your help because I don't want to be living in a room anymore that's a children's room.
Yeah.
I want to live in a woman's room.
She says, I'm a woman now.
Yes. She needs something that is more sophisticated, more mature, more cosmopolitan, right? And Karen's just like, huh? What?
Oh, Karen says, don't wish your life away. She gets all very like
philosophical,
esoteric. And
Diana's like, what do you mean?
Yeah, she's looking at her like, what is up with
I
that?
liked the way that Michele Lee was playing this scene. She was completely out of it, really showing that her mind was elsewhere. I totally bought into that. And I think that, again, we're seeing here that Karen's children are really starting to have an effect on her in this new wrinkle in her life that she is pregnant once again. Now, did you also know she had all that white painted wicker furniture, which was so popular back then? Yeah.
Well, it's still popular in some areas of the world. Maybe at my mom's house.
Possibly. A little bit later in the day, Sid comes home from work, and Eric's outside. I don't know if he's still shooting hoops, but he comes up to his father, and he's like, oh, Ginger's sister's here, and I was thinking maybe I would take her out to the movies, tomorrow, Saturday, over the weekend. And Sid's like, oh, yeah, sure. No, don't worry. I'll take you guys. And then he's like, no, that's not what I was thinking.
I want to take a cab.
Yeah. He's and so Sid's like, oh, you're being all mature.
And then he says, of course, well, maybe you need some bread.
Yeah. So Sid is more than happy to help. And I think he's proud of his son.
I thought that was sweet. I thought that was like, finally, we're getting a moment there where, again, he's giving the fatherly advice.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see that. We haven't seen too much of that yet.
Right. Inside, Karen is preparing dinner, and she's at that weird wooden island thing with the weird overhang. She's chopping mushrooms, totally distracted. She even drops a plate, I think, right?
Yeah.
Sid overhears it.
Breaks the plate. There is some concern. Is everything okay? And she's like, I'm fine.
Yeah. But she does say, do you think we could talk later?
Yeah. Setting the stage. Just wanted to make note that Karen is wearing a really great sweatshirt with these like cherries all along it, kind of 70s style. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Sid is wearing one of those cardigans that I love, old man cardigans. I have a few of them. I love those. The kind of Orlan, 70s.
You've been collecting those for years.
Yeah, I mean, I've got rid of a lot too, but I always end up picking up another one.
Yeah. It's the following evening, and Jill and Eric are returning from their movie date.
Yes. Did you see how cute it was that he opened the door for her?
Oh, what a sweet young gentleman Eric is. Again, totally out of his league with Ginger from the other episode. My gosh. Very sweet, though. They're talking about the movie that they just saw. They didn't like it. They didn't like it.
They didn't like it. They said it's not as good as Close Encounters or Star Wars.
Right. And then she says, well, I wish we would have seen a foreign film instead.
Oh, a foreign film.
Yes.
So she's a highbrow one, isn't she?
I think it's showing already that she's maybe a little bit more sophisticated than Eric.
Yes.
And we see that even further in this scene because when he goes in to kiss her goodnight, it's a very short little kiss, and then she kind of leans in for more.
She grabs him kind of, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay.
All right.
She's
and
being
she also invites Eric to a beach party the following day that a bunch of her friends are having.
Yeah, and they're going to get picked up or
and
something.
he agrees to go along. So their relationship is going to continue, and we're going to see how this unfolds throughout the episode. It's the same evening over at the Fairgates.
Karen and
she's kind of looking in the mirror,
Sid are wearing robes.
Yes, she's looking in the mirror pensively, and he walks in. He's like, "Is now a good time to talk?" And she's ready to tell Sid.
And then she said something today when I found out, and he found out what?
Right.
Then we get the big reveal.
Right.
Let me tell it my way.
Yes.
So she then tells that she's 37 years old, and she knows who she is.
She likes her life. She likes it just the way it is.
I mean, you could imagine after raising 3 children, doing, volunteer work and all that other stuff that she's been doing, she might be pretty happy with where things are now. I guess Michael is what? Probably about 11?
12 or something
12.
like that. Yeah.
So, they're all on their way to being teens.
Yeah, she has, about 6 or 7 more years of being this mother of her current brood. So she said that she spent the entire afternoon thinking of every scenario because she is pregnant. And Sid's reaction immediately
He's very excited.
He like laughs.
Yeah. He's like, we're going to have a baby.
He's like, really?
I thought that was cute. I was like, wow.
It was cute, but it also definitely shows the difference between a man and a woman, really. Let's be honest. And again, I almost feel like, you and I are not necessarily the most qualified people to be reviewing and recapping this particular episode.
That's true.
We are not mothers. We do not have that urge. We don't know what it's like. We don't know how wonderful it is to be a mother or what that bond is like. But I did think in that moment that Sid's reaction is just so Sid. It was so simple because she asks, I want you to be really, really honest. How do you feel about this? How did you feel when I said that? And he just said, we're going to have a baby.
Yeah, he was super stoked.
Didn't he think about the financial responsibility?
Nobody worried about that. It was television.
It's a sweet scene, and you can see that Karen, there is an element in her where she's somewhat excited about it, but she's just really concerned with how this is going to affect the future.
Following morning, we're back in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And there's this eerie synclavier music playing
I didn't
again.
notice that.
Piano,
Okay.
kind of pensive.
I did notice
stuff.
that Sid was wearing his Botany 500s again.
Yes, and Karen is already awake.
Yeah, she's been thinking about this again. And so when Sid kind of wakes up, I think he even asks her, like, what's wrong? And Karen's like, didn't you just hear what I told you last night? Right? So she's been stirring, thinking about.
Yeah, she's been thinking about this all night.
Does she really want to be a mother again? She tells Sid that she's paid her dues.
Yeah, 3 times.
3 times with these kids, right? She doesn't know how many more times she wants to change a diaper or tend to a runny nose or worry about someone's report card.
And then Sid says, well, we don't have a choice. And then she comes back and says, what do you mean we don't have a choice? We're not living in the age of Oliver Cromwell.
Right. It's the
It's
1980s. And women have the choice what to do with their bodies. And in this situation, Karen is not sure that she wants to put her body through that or her future through that.
Yeah, she said something to the effect, I have authority over my own life.
Yes.
And we are not carrying this baby. I am.
Right.
Which, fair enough. I mean, like, that's a thing. It's a danger. She's 37.
Absolutely. Now, Sid does say in that moment, he says, listen, if there is ever going to be a harm to you, then you should not have this baby. But other than that, he wants to have the baby. He makes it very clear. And magically, Diana has overheard this lie
she's like,
out in
walks
the hallway. She knocks on the door, but then she just kind of walks right in. She's like, what's going on? Who's pregnant?
She said, who's having a baby?
And then Sid says, your mom. And then Karen darts this look like, why are you telling her now?
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of wild of Sid to do that. And I'm curious what you think of that. Do you think that he was being like manipulative in a way, like to kind of garner support.
No, I don't think so. I
thought it was kind of a not such a great move on his part. He should have kept it quiet. I mean, obviously, how could they keep it quiet? They were yelling about it, but still, it just felt like he was digging into her, to Karen, because they're not agreeing on this topic. So either way, it backfires because Diana is not happy about this.
Yeah, Diana does
She says, "You can't be pregnant," and Karen's like, "Yes, I am." And she goes, "Why?"
Yeah, that was funny. I'm loving Diana in this episode so far.
Yeah. Karen is so upset right now. She's like, "I don't have time to deal with you because I'm just dealing with my own feelings." So she kind of goes into the bathroom, and then Diana storms off, and then Sid is left there with this like tousled early morning hair. And to me, in that moment, he had the Gibson hair.
He had the Gibson girl.
I thought it was so funny.
Well, that Gibson girl's coming in later.
Yes, it is.
I really like this scene because they're back in the kitchen and it's Eric and Michael. And Michael is like, "Oh, so what happened on your date?"
Who made the first move?
I had that same hairstyle, same color hair and everything. I was just like, he is exactly like the way I would have behaved at his age. So he
wants all the details of his older brother's date.
He wants all the dirt.
Sort of like live vicariously. But even in this moment, I feel like he would be moving quicker than Eric.
Oh, totally. I think he's definitely more advanced in a way.
So Diana storms in like a hurricane, and the boys are all like, "What's wrong with you?" She says, "Like nothing. Everything." And then Michael says, "Oh, did your face break out again?" Which I thought was funny. It's exactly what a little kid would say to their older sister. So then what does Diana say?
She says, "Do you know what's happening under this very roof?"
Oh, my God.
And it's like, okay, here comes the gossip is out.
She says, Mom's pregnant.
Mom's pregnant.
And the boys can't believe it.
Yeah, they say she's too old or something like that. And then, of course, Karen overhears this. And then she says something like, "Oh, we're going to have a talk here."
Right.
And then I think at that very moment, too, doesn't Valine
magically,
walk in?
She also knocks on the door and then
weird.
just walks in without waiting for a response.
And then she's like, oh, very excited that Karen's going to have a baby. She's just not getting it.
She goes, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it." And Karen says, "I can't either."
That was fun.
She does say to Val, "Please keep this a secret for now," because obviously Karen has still not come to terms yet with this development, and she doesn't know how she's going to handle it. So she doesn't want the word getting out in case she decides to terminate the pregnancy. Later that night, Sid walks in on Eric, and he's in his bathroom, the ensuite bathroom, and he's maybe using some of his cologne.
Yeah, he's probably putting on Brute or something.
And he's just really sweet. He's saying, "Yeah, we're going to go down to the beach. I'm having another little date with Jill." And I think, I don't know, there's not much said there, but Sid's, you can say he's like proud of his son.
Very proud to help him out.
On his face there. And he's like, "Oh yeah, have a good time." We go to the beach.
Oh, I love that. The boom box.
Yeah.
Got me very excited.
Uh-huh.
First thing is like they're playing some kind of disco or something.
It was a groove.
Yeah, and then I looked at that boom box and I thought, did you have one of those? I had several of those.
Yeah, that's a device that I wish I would have held on to for whatever reason. I'm sure those boom boxes, we probably used them so much that they got so busted up and probably...
Usually the tape player would break on them and that would be the end of it. Right. But yeah, I would kill to have one of those.
Were we at a bar somewhere where they had just tons and tons and tons of boom boxes?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe in Arizona, in Phoenix.
Yeah, seems familiar. At any rate, they're at this beach party, and it is Jill and Eric, and then a couple of Jill's friends, I guess. One of them is played by the actor Gary Sinise, who you may not know, but I remember when they would do the Knots Landing reunions, they would talk about how proud they were that they had once had Gary Sinise on the show, because at the time in the 90s, Gary Sinise was a really popular actor, and I'm not sure if he was nominated for Academy Award or something. I don't know, but he was in Forrest Gump. He was in Apollo 13. Like, he was a pretty big actor, and he's continued to work in many TV shows. But this is one of his very first roles. So he plays the guy that tries to offer Eric more beer. He's trying to get Eric to drink faster to kind of catch up with the rest of them.
Yeah, and Eric chugs it. I was impressed. I was like, wow. I kept thinking it was going to end, though, like get real bad real quick.
Oh, I was wondering when Alien and Music and the rest of the biker gang were going to show up.
Yeah, well, or I just kept thinking, like, is this going to get real dark real quick? Is there going to be, a drowning or something? I don't know. That's where my brain goes.
Well, I think the reason you're thinking that is because I think there is a later episode involving Eric that has similar items
Right,
to this.
right.
You're not far off.
I guess when you live near the beach, you would go to many beach parties,
Yes!
and there must be many
I'm
beach.
sure you went to a couple beach parties living here in Southern California.
Yeah, I went to a
Yes?
few. You
Uh-huh.
know, stealing the car and going and drinking wine coolers or something like that at Zuma.
There you
That's
go.
what we would do.
I guess at some point in this party, the couples start like breaking off and start hooking up. And so Jill, again, is interested in Eric, and she says something like, "Oh, I'm cold." And so he says, "Okay, well, you can use my jacket or a blanket or whatever." And when he leans in to give her that, she takes advantage and kisses him. Right. And so at that moment, I think Eric can see where she wants this night to go, and he's not ready for
Yeah,
that.
he's not ready.
Right?
And he automatically kind of pulls back.
Yeah.
And then I think he says,
He
it's,
says,
it's
"It's
getting
getting
late. And like,
We should go. We should
Yeah.
go. We should go." And she says, "Well, I don't really want to go. I'm having a great time." So he walks off, and she remains at the party.
back at the Fairgate house, we see Karen going through her books and making some calculations.
Yeah.
And she mentions that she's going to have several $1,000s less to give to the ACLU.
Right.
So she's obviously figuring out, like, this baby is going to cost money.
And Sid says, "Well, that's great that you kind of figured it out. And yeah, it's a shame that the ACLU will go without thousands of dollars. But Karen, don't worry, because you can still volunteer." And she says, when? "Yeah, well, I'm raising a baby. Don't you understand how difficult that is?" And because again, I think that there is an element to this whole thing where Sid is not taking this seriously enough. I know he's a smart guy and he's a great father, but he's also a man, so he doesn't really know what really goes into it, and it shows in this scene.
And he says something. I got kind of caught off guard. It was not a nice remark. It was like, well, it's not like you have a career
Right.
about her volunteer
Right.
work. And that really gets her goat.
She is riled up because she says, although it technically is, I'm not some executive that's bringing home money, it is something that she takes great pride in. And she actually says, at this point in my life, I think it is more important to help society than it is to maybe to have another child. It's interesting because she mentions the environment. I can't remember. She mentioned
She
some
said
other...
something like the world is dirty and running out of
Yes.
resources and it's full of injustice.
Yes.
And it's just like, well, it's exactly the same as now, isn't it?
Thank you.
Nothing changes.
Thank you. I'm going to say something terrible. Do we really need another child in this world?
Do we need another
But
child?
maybe we do need another Fairgate. We don't know.
We don't know. Another Fairgate. But
At any rate, she is pissed off.
She is
says
angry.
to Sid, "Why don't you stay downstairs for a while? I'm going to go upstairs." She says, "Your simple view of good and bad right now, I can't stand it." I thought it was interesting that Karen brought up that she felt Sid had this kind of simple view of good and bad, because it did remind me of the earlier scene when she told him that she was pregnant, and he just sort of laughed and said, "Oh, we're having a baby."
We're having a baby.
It's like, you got to think about this a little bit more. I mean, maybe you didn't need to think about it 16 years ago when you were young kids. But now that you've got 3 children, they got to go to college. You got to put them through college. You got to think about these things a little bit more, Sid. Come on.
Obviously, you think about it because
Your family had 4 children. I'm sure that was very difficult, right?
my mom always wanted to have more. And I was like, that would have been crazy. But
Yeah.
anyway,
I think my mom and dad said they were thinking of having a 3rd child, which would have made me the middle child. I wonder how different my life would have been.
you would have not liked it. You wouldn't have got all those records and
True.
new clothes all
Yeah.
the time.
I did score as a
No
youngest child.
Legos or whatever, all those Star Wars toys.
Right. The following day, Karen finds Sid in the garage. He's kind of hunched over another one of these classic
Oh, the
cars.
hot rod. It's a hot rod.
Does the redometer go off again? Yes.
Yes, the redometer goes off
She
again.
is wearing a red robe. We got 2 in one episode,
It's
guys.
quite a nice red robe.
Yes, I think she wore that in a previous episode too. I love when they rewear the clothes. So Karen goes in there. She sort of apologizes for the night before.
She's
telling
bringing him hot chocolate.
Yeah, and
you know.
she starts kind of regaling him with tales of their past, and really the audience as well, because this is the first time we're hearing a lot of this, that when they were pregnant with Diana, they actually weren't even married
Yeah, they weren't
yet.
married yet.
And she was still not finished with college, and she was scared because she was in college and she had wanted so much for her life, but she also loved Sid so much. So she was willing to, get married and have this child. And she says how wonderful the last 16 years have been raising these 3 children. But she also says because that early pregnancy during college sort of truncated whatever plan she had for herself, that she's always felt a little incomplete. And she says to Sid, "Do you understand?" And he says, "No."
No. Yeah, and at first I thought he's being a jerk.
Yeah, I did too.
But then he comes back and says, I wanted to be a race car driver, but I gave up my dreams of being a race car driver.
Yeah.
And now I'm running a car dealer.
Yeah, I love the line. He says, I gave up being the hero of Le Mans.
Yeah.
For being...
But he said, that's okay. You and I, we have the kids, and that's enough for me.
He said it was worth it. And that's why he's upset that, according to Karen, all of that is not enough for her. So he leaves her in the garage and she starts crying.
Yeah, just the camera pans out and she's got this sad look on her face.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to get through that midway commercial break there.
Now, I think not that far after that, Sid is leaving with the kids, taking them somewhere. They're going to go roller skating.
Yes. Karen then goes into one of the children's rooms. I'm not sure if it's
the boys' room.
It's a boys' room.
It's definitely the boys' room.
With some really, really wild wallpaper of airplanes, and I'm telling you, it's so busy. I would have had anxiety with that wallpaper, but
she's putting
very cluttered room.
Does she puts a few clothes away or something,
and then picking it up? And again, it's kind of, I think, meant to show that she's like, gosh, do I really want to do all of this again?
Yeah, well, and she shuts the door, but then she goes back again and opens it back up again, and then she goes behind the bed and she finds this red piece of paper.
Yeah,
it's a big
it's
a handmade Christmas card.
Christmas card that shows the entire family. It's very sweet, and it definitely touches her heart, and it makes her think about how wonderful her kids have been and how much they've meant to her in her life.
We're at Kenny and Ginger's house.
Jill's coming home.
Home, so that's good. We know she didn't drown. I also noticed in that last scene, too, the one with Eric getting in the car, that he was there. I just want to make sure that they both made it back. They were there, so it's like, okay, everything must be fine. Maybe they had a little hangover. Who knows?
Yeah, Jill comes in and she's eating some food or whatever, and then she flops down on the floor. She opens up the comics, which I thought was really relatable. And Ginger is there polishing her thigh-high boots, and Kenny's in the background, and he's kind of cleaning his
audio equipment,
his reel-to-reel. I love it. And so Ginger asks, so how was the beach party? And Jill says, it was okay.
Yeah, she was not too
And Ginger's
impressed.
surprised because, this was the whole reason apparently why she came to visit Ginger, was to go to this beach party. And she reiterates, it was all right. Eric left early.
Yeah, and so she was obviously disappointed.
Yeah, and Ginger says, well, Eric is shy. And she knows that. She has experience with that. And then Kenny kind of chimes in. Guys they don't know how it's going to go. They don't want to, they don't want to look like a bozo, he said, in front of other guys.
I thought that was sweet that he actually offered the male perspective to Ginger's sister and just kind of said, yeah, he might be, unsure of himself, or, you remember, it's like, they're young.
Yeah, they're all young, right? I mean, Kenny and Ginger are young.
Yeah.
And so is these other kids. And so it was a much more open conversation that felt very comfortable between all of them, right? Even when Jill's talking about the other couples kind of hooking up, it's not like Kenny and Ginger are surprised or shocked. They've all been through this very recently.
They just did it a few years ago.
Fact, then when Ginger starts to talk about her experience with another guy, then Kenny's like, oh, no.
Oh, yeah, we don't want to hear that. But, it was a nice scene between Kenny and Ginger, too, because it was very playful. Instead of them having an argument for once. I was like, okay, cool. They seemed pretty solid.
Yeah, I really liked this scene. I just felt like, gosh, I want to hang out there with these people right now, especially on that big oversized cushion, the brown, gold, and orange cushion.
Venice Beach.
Venice Beach, you sure?
Venice Beach, Santa Monica, Venice Beach, totally.
Yep.
I used to ride my bicycle up and down that whole little area. So they're in that in-between area between Ocean Park.
I think you've sold a couple condos around that area, probably.
Yeah, kind of. I've sold something around
I thought it was cute because even Sid is roller skating with the kids, and they're having just a kind of a real casual conversation that's obviously kind of halfway in the middle of it. But they are talking about how this new baby is going to affect the Fairgate household. And what does Diana say? She
said something like, you said the same thing about Rusty, the dog, the goldfish. Great idea until you have them in the house a month. So that was fun.
I like the fact they brought up the dog because if you remember in the very first episode, there was a mention of the dog.
Yeah.
And then even Richard says something at that party. He's like, oh, Sid, I want to talk to you about their dog. And then we never see the dog again.
Never seen a dog.
And now we know the dog's name was Rusty. I think where Diana's coming from is that she's the oldest child. And so she knows how much work it is to help take care of the children. And so she's trying to prepare Michael and Eric that they're going to have to do that too with some.
Yeah,
new
I mean,
child coming.
Diana would probably be like, well, she'd be like my big sister.
Mm-hmm.
I had the eldest sister and then, 3 boys.
Yeah.
Okay. So my eldest sister was always the one, doing the babysitting and helping my mom out when my mom was working part-time or whatever. So that's a big job.
And
to
I'm
deal
sure
with.
to a young woman, that's actually in some ways kind of a fun thing to do, probably, until it's not, right? Until you'd rather be doing something
Well,
else.
she's a teen, right?
Yeah.
Or now she's a woman, I should say.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to do that. She'll
Right.
probably want to go out on dates or
Right.
something.
So I thought that was nice because Sid sits them down. You can clearly see that he's registered what Karen has told him about how she's feeling, because now he's telling the kids that their mom has a lot to process. So what we can all do right now is just be as supportive as possible.
And be on good behavior.
And be on good behavior, because he wants to make sure that Karen's not scared off by the idea of having to raise another child.
Everybody makes it back home from roller skating.
And immediately the kids are ready to lend a helping hand to mom.
Doesn't
I'll
Michael
do the
say, "Oh, can I do the dishes
I'll
for
take out
you?"
the trash.
Yeah, it's like everybody's buttering her up.
And then Karen says, I want everybody to get ready because we're going to go out to dinner tonight. I'm going to treat you. We're going to celebrate.
I feel superb.
Yeah. And the kids are like, wait a minute. We didn't do anything yet. And she says, no, actually, you have done something. She realizes how much her children mean to her. And she sees so much of herself reflected in each of her children. And in return, she sees so much of her children reflected in her. It's a very beautiful scene, and I have to say I started crying a little bit. But I've been emotional this whole week, so it's not surprising. I thought it was really, really sweet, and obviously at this point all the children are on board. And then she says, okay, now the reservation's at 6, so everybody has to get ready. I love she says right to Michael, she goes, you need a bath.
Yeah, you need a bath, you smell, or something like that. I don't know.
So then I think Diana kind of stays behind, and she apologizes for her kind of bratty behavior before. And Karen's like, it's okay. And Diana says, I just didn't want to have to share you with another child. And Karen says, well, you know what? I wasn't sure I wanted to share myself.
Yeah, that was a nice, sweet moment between mother-daughter.
Yeah, it was really sweet. And actually, I think that's an important thing to discuss, that idea of sharing yourself with another human, another person in your family. It takes a lot out of you, right? It takes a lot of your time. It takes a lot of your energy. And I think it's a very viable, honest concern to have that Karen is showing there. So afterwards, after Diana goes upstairs, Karen kind of turns to Sid, and Sid hasn't said really anything during this whole thing. He's just kind of smiling, letting Karen talk. And she says, God, I love you. And it's just a really sweet little scene there. It's a little bit later. They're getting ready to leave, and Sid and Eric are on the couch.
Waiting for the ladies to come
Yes,
down.
yes.
And there's classical music playing.
I know. Again, classical music at the Fairgates. It's just so weird.
I
to
mean,
me.
wouldn't you think maybe like 1980, maybe they would have like Kenny Rogers on, or maybe
Christopher Cross.
Fleetwood Mac. I don't know, something.
Air Supply.
Air Supply.
Sid asks Eric, how did the date go or whatever? And he can kind of surmise that Eric is being a little shy and a little cagey about it. But he has a misperception of what's going on here, because he thinks that Eric is sort of upset that Jill wants to take things too slow. But it's actually the reverse. Right? But no matter what, I think Sid's advice is still worthwhile, because he says, nowadays we like to take our time, and it's good for everybody, and it's okay.
He said something like, girls are more cautious
Yeah.
than men.
Yeah.
And then Eric is like, but that was 20 years ago, Dad. That's a typical fun thing. Like, if you can remember those times when, like, your parents are having the talk with you, and you're
Yes.
like, we don't need to talk
You're
about
like,
this.
well, I'm more hip than you are.
I know all about this, and
We still do that today, even with our
we
parents.
talked about that in school. We don't have to talk about that right
Yeah.
now, okay?
All right, it's time to celebrate the new baby coming into the Fairgate home, and everybody is at this fancy dinner. I think Karen is enjoying some crab.
Yeah, the crab looks
Eric's
delicious.
got some baby back ribs, I think.
And of course, it's fancy because there's multiple forks.
Exactly. That's how you know it's fancy,
And
right?
of course, Karen's got her Gibson girl.
She does.
Hairstyle
She does
is
yet
back.
again. She does yet
And
again.
Michael is having issues working out the forks, and they're having a discussion about.
He's cutting his, I think it's like a roast chicken or something, it looks
Yeah,
and he's cutting it with the 2 forks.
with the 2 forks.
This is typical children at a fancy restaurant behavior, and it kind of builds like tension. There's a toast at one time. Do you notice?
Yeah, they said, let's toast to us.
And do you notice that they both have a beer?
Yeah,
right?
They had beers.
Both mom and dad have a beer, even though she's pregnant.
Dad had the beer. Well, I don't know if it was beer.
It was beer, Doug.
All right,
oh
well,
my
it was the
gosh.
early days. You know,
yeah.
think about it this way too. In those olden days,
Yeah,
I mean,
I know.
people used to smoke
and drink. I know,
and it was
I
like,
know.
oh yeah, well, having a baby, it's good for them.
So as the tension kind of mounts, the kids are kind of all ribbing each other about these silverware and the utensils and the clanking of the glass. You can see this consternation on Karen's face, and she sort of gets up to excuse herself. And at that moment, I thought, oh, she's again second guessing herself now. She's thinking, do I really want to deal with these bratty kids again, right? So she gets up and she leaves. And then...
well, they talk about the date.
Right. Diana asks
Diana's like,
Eric how the date was. Her father says, oh, yeah, she's just being friendly, asking about the date. And then Michael says, no, she's just being nosy. Which I thought was funny because it's like mother like daughter.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
Oh, okay. So I guess Karen is taking a little bit longer in the bathroom than they would have anticipated. Oh, no, that's not what happens.
No, the waitress comes up to the table and says, Mr. Fairgate. And she pulls him aside and says that your wife is laying down in the bathroom when we called the paramedics.
Yeah.
So
something's up.
Bad.
Yeah.
So do you have any idea where that restaurant might have been that they ate at?
Well, you know we love to talk about locations here on Seaview Circle, and I was eyeing that restaurant very closely. I was looking at the backs of the chairs. I was looking at the floor. I was looking at the walls. It did feel very familiar.
Well, see, you're better at these things than I am. At first, when I saw the chairs, I was thinking it felt like the dining area was like the Hamburger Hamlet, even though it didn't look like it.
I did think that Karen eating the crab and Eric eating the ribs, that threw me off a little bit. Because I think it's a restaurant that we used to go to when we lived in Santa Monica. It is actually in Venice. Does it starting to ring a bell at all?
I know what you're thinking. Of course, my memory is terrible.
Okay.
So you're very good with these specifics. So
let's untie the knot in person.
Maybe they'll have some crab. Sure, why not?
We can do this in this week's Untying the Knot.
And in this segment, we take deep dives into a specific production aspect of the series, or perhaps provide a bio of fan favorite cast members.
All right, so shall we go? Let's go. Check it out. Hey.
Oh my God. Where am I?
We are here in Venice at the corner of Lincoln and Rose.
It's magic.
Yes, and what do you think? Do you think this might be the place?
It's possible. We need to go inside and see.
This is La Cabana. It's a restaurant from 1963. It's a Mexican restaurant here in Venice, California.
Salud. Salud.
As it turns out, this is clearly not the place.
However, it had some motifs.
Yeah, I feel like it had the same lighting and it had the same white walls and the same molded wooden archways. It still does look very similar to maybe what it looked like in 1963, but they are renovating it now, and we were offered a sneak peek, which we weren't able to film that part, but it's really cool the way they have kind of redone their bar. But obviously, the search continues. But now, while we're here in the Venice, Santa Monica area, sorry for the audio, by the way, let's go check out another filming location from Knots Landing Season 1 that we know for sure, big, 99.9% restaurant that we've already spoken of earlier in this season. Let's go. Ready? Hey, we are in Santa Monica now. We are on 3rd. We are actually at Michael's, which we can verify absolutely 100%.
This is definitely a Knots Landing location.
This is from Season 1, Episode 4. We already covered it, The Lie. This is where the girls, Valine, Karen, and Laura went for their lunch date. And then later they just reused the same restaurant, but the interior to shoot the celebratory dinner at the end. This was the restaurant where Gary and Val were concerned about the price because there were no prices in the menu, right? That's one of the keys that you know that it's a fancy restaurant.
Well, it's kind of fancy, but it's not fancy. It's got great artwork in there, like original 1979, 1980 kind of artists. Even in the bathroom is really cool.
So this is where Laura met her next gentleman caller, and he leaned in and lit her cigarette. And meanwhile, Val was over there, and she saw that Laura was lighting the cigarette. So classic, so good, and it still looks the same. The little miniature bamboo wicker is still visible along the back wall, and all of the umbrellas are still maybe not the exact same umbrellas,
but similar
same
style.
Look. Yeah.
So if you're ever in Santa Monica, I would totally tell you, go here. It's a really special venue. It's kind of like almost like a tropical tiki garden.
For
you
sure.
know, it's super
The garden
cool.
looks pretty much the same. The interior looks pretty much the same, although they did change the front, I guess, during the pandemic. But yeah, it's really cool. If you are a fan of 70s vintage restaurants, this one was built in 1979, and then Knots Landing filmed right thereafter. So really, really cool. It was fun to go check this out. So while we did not completely untie the knot for this episode for that restaurant location, we only loosened it.
We loosened that.
I don't know. Maybe somebody out there knows what that restaurant was for the scene where they were celebrating the new Fairgate baby. If anybody knows, let us know. And yeah, okay. I guess we
gotta go back.
Our bellies are full. It's time to go back to the episode. Well, I'm full now.
Yeah, super full.
Wasn't that fun?
Yeah, it was fun.
All right. Well, let's now that we're fueled up, let's just get back to the episode. After the commercial break, we are at the hospital, and Sid and the kids have been waiting overnight, I guess, for quite some time with any news as to how Karen is doing. And then Gary and Val show up. It's the first time we've seen Gary all episode, and they agree to take the kids back home to the cul-de-sac. There's nothing more they can do, right?
Yeah.
And then the doctor, it's the same doctor from before.
Dr. Bender.
Dr. Bender. She talks to Sid and says, Karen's actually going to be okay. You can take her home in the morning.
But she also gave this really weird look. Did you notice that?
Well,
she just kind of looked like...
No, I think this was the thing. So she said to Sid, why don't you go in and spend some time with her? You have to remember that at the beginning of the episode, she's the one that delivered this news to Karen.
That's true.
And she could see in Karen that Karen was not sure about all this, right? That she was very surprised by this news or this development in her life. So I think that's where that look was coming from. It's more of a concern that... maybe Karen wasn't really ready for this anyway, right? There's a passing of time, and Sid is watching over Karen in the hospital room, and she awakes, and she says, oh, wow, I just had this crazy dream where I guess she's in some big room, and there's a candle.
There's a candle.
And there's other candles, and she's trying to light them, but as she lights one, the others go out.
I kept thinking she must be on some real good drugs in there.
Well, see, I saw it as a metaphor, obviously, for everything that she has going on in life. And does she really want to light another candle? Does she really want to have one more thing to worry about? That was kind of her body telling her, no, this is not the time. She apologizes to Sid that they've lost the baby, apparently.
Yeah.
And then Sid says, don't worry, we still have everything that we had before all this. And she's like almost giddy and just starts laughing.
She mouths, I love you.
Yeah.
Did you see that? That was sweet.
Yeah.
It was a sweet moment.
Yeah.
They've got...
And she does admit also, she said, I'm too old anyway, in that moment. So, again, there is this possibility that it could have happened. It could have been wonderful for them, right? If they could have worked through it. But it also could have been a major pain in the ass.
Yes, probably the latter.
But at least Sid is happy that he knows that she was on board with having this fourth child with him, had that been the case. So I think that's kind of where he's coming from. And he had said earlier, if there had ever been a medical issue that would have compromised Karen, he would not have wanted to go through it.
Yeah, right. It's just got to be difficult having a baby at 37 or later for any woman, I think.
Yeah.
Eric and Jill are reunited.
She's taken Kenny and Ginger's advice, right? She's heard what they had to say, and she wants to reassure Eric that she thinks it's okay that he left the party early. And she says, it was boring anyway after you left.
Very sweet.
Right? It was very, very sweet. Again, you can see that she is definitely a little bit more mature, a little bit more experienced than he is. And I thought it was very sweet of her to reassure him and make him feel like he wasn't like a total dork, right? And she did say something like, sometimes, I know guys can feel pressure to do things, but, she respects him and his decision. And that made him feel better immediately. You could see it on his face.
Yeah, and then they said, well, would you want to play some more hoops?
Yeah.
So they
but
got...
for real this time,
for real.
Right?
And so they got back to just being normal.
Yeah.
Which was cute.
I thought it was really, really sweet.
Yeah, it was a sweet scene. Now, do we know anything whether she'll show up again in Knots Landing?
I don't know.
Jill?
I can't remember. I do know. I don't think so. I don't think we're going to see Jill again. I do know that we will see Ginger's mother at some point. So I'll be really interested to see how all these little pieces fit together in the long run. But I thought she was really good.
I thought she did a good job.
Yeah, we'll talk about her a little bit later on. The next scene, we're back at the hospital. It's the denouement. Okay, and
Yes.
Sid is wheeling Karen out in the wheelchair, which is as customary in hospitals. And they're stopped at the elevator. The doors open, and there's a brand new mother with her newborn.
Oh, I felt kind of sad for Karen at that moment.
Karen smiles when she sees it.
Yeah.
But then as soon as the doors close, she breaks down. She saw what could have been, right? Because everybody loves a newborn. That's the fun part. I mean, minus the diapers, maybe, but...
Well, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I'm not sure if I'm into a newborn. I can't handle it. I'm sorry. I'm just not cut out for it.
They're so cute.
Yeah, I guess for some people.
What about our kittens when they were our cats when they were kittens?
I'm more of a kitten person.
Although we will say
Kittens
that
and puppies.
Our last cat, who was the last kitten, Susie, the one who was disrupting our recording in the last episode, if you noticed that, when she was a kitten, remember she used to eat everything.
She was a terror.
She would eat washcloths,
Socks, blankets,
Afghan blankets, like
sheets.
So we were so concerned and so worried. You can see why a parent would be so concerned about their children.
I get it. I feel that tension of like, oh my God, my baby. What's going to happen? I got to bring my baby to the hospital.
Yes.
Like now.
Yes.
Well, I believe this is the final scene of the episode.
The final scene, we start off seeing Laura and Richard washing their cars like in tandem. And of course, Richard is telling Laura how to do it.
Oh, yeah. He's saying, you need to do it this way.
But I love it because then Laura turned the hose on.
Yeah, she turned the hose on.
Which is the right thing to do.
Totally. It was the best move that she could have done.
This was such a great little scene because it included everybody from the cast. It kind of panned over. You see Eric playing basketball with Jill, and then Kenny's like snapping photos of them.
And he has his like cool pants on.
Oh, he looks so
cool
cute
70s
there.
outfit.
He looks so cute.
Yeah, everybody's outside, and like Gary's got his velour top on.
Yes,
kind of like what you got your velour on today.
Ginger has
Inspired.
a kite there, and so they're all talking about the kids, and Valley says something like, "Oh, aren't they playing a little rough?" And then Gary says, "Well, I think that's the point." And then Kenny says, "Yeah, they don't call it one-on-one for nothing."
Oh God!
Oh my gosh! So then Karen comes home. They're all kind of waiting for this moment. Karen gets out, and then she says, "Hi."
Hi, like everything's normal.
Yeah, she's just kind of trying to like address everybody at once, let her know that, you know, things are kind of back to normal, because she immediately says to Eric, don't let that basketball get into the flower bed. And then she tells Diana and Michael, who are fighting over
Stop fighting.
Stop fighting. And so I don't know, it just shows that that she's okay with this. Everything's going to be fine. And I don't know, I love this scene because of the normality of everything. It just really reminded me again of my childhood, being on a cul-de-sac, the little moments you would see, you know, the car wash over here, the basketball over here, the whatever. It was just very heartwarming. I have to say, I teared up multiple times in this episode.
Well, you see, my cul-de-sac where I lived in LA, across the street from the cul-de-sac, you know, the thing in LA is you just don't see anybody. Nobody ever really goes out. I mean, I would see my one set of neighbors and we'd play softball, and maybe the one other kid we would hang out with. But we never really was like that.
In my cul-de-sac, this is in Illinois.
You were lucky, I think, your cul-de-sac in Illinois.
I mean, all the kids were kind of around the same age, so we all played together. There was maybe two age groups. There was my age group, and then there was my sister's age group. So there was that group of friends, my group of friends. And yeah, and then all the parents were friends with one another. So there was always activity going on. Certainly more so in the summer. But yeah, this vibe, anytime they're outside all together, it's very reminiscent of my childhood. So I loved it. All right, now we're after the episode, we're going to talk a little bit about some of our favorite things that we liked about it. We can talk about first, I think, maybe some of these guest stars. Jill was probably the biggest guest star in this episode. She was played by Jennifer McAllister. So that appears like someone I would see maybe in my school growing up as a Jennifer McAllister, and that's exactly what she would look like. But she acted up to like 1990, so she didn't have a lot of television credits, but I think she did a really good job. She felt very natural.
Yeah, very
right?
natural.
Yeah.
She did good.
We talked about Gary Sinise, who played the guy named Lee, I guess. I don't know if they ever said his name, but he was the gentleman at the beach who offered the drink to Eric, and he did go on to bigger and better things. And then, of course, there was also Georgianne Johnson.
Yeah, who is
Dr.
Georgianne Johnson?
Bender. I didn't really look her up too much, but she's been in a lot of things. She did do an episode, I believe, of Dallas. And
maybe that's where she was kind of picked up into the Knots Landing universe.
Yeah, I did see that she worked on over 1,000 episodes of a daytime soap opera. I'm not sure what the era was, but it's called Somerset. Never heard of it. And then she was also later on the Colbys as well. So she's definitely a soap person.
Okay.
I also really liked Michelle Lee's acting in this episode. I thought she had a really good balance of showing tenderness and showing this connection to her children. It was very sweet, like when she was at the restaurant and she said, "Oh, Eric, you look so handsome today." You know, these are moments that we don't see a lot of in Karen because she also has this very tough exterior. And we also saw that in this episode as well when she was standing up for political causes and in her support of the ACLU. So I really like that, to show that balance in the Karen character, and I thought Michelle did a great job. I felt this episode in general was very traditionally a Knots Landing episode, focusing on the family and the relations. I really liked that.
What about Claudia Lano? I thought she had some good little scene stealing going on as per usual.
Of course. I
good one-liners.
Really enjoy seeing her performance this time through. And you did see a little bit of tensions flare between mother and daughter, which I know we're going to see in later seasons as well. But I do think you can see a real love between both the characters in this episode and also between the actresses who play them. So I can't wait to see more.
Yeah,
of
I'm
those
always
two.
want to see more.
But in general, I just thought it was a really heartwarming episode, and I teared up a couple times. Like I said, I really enjoyed that last scene too. Anytime they're on the cul-de-sac, and it's just very natural behavior. It feels very Knots Landing to me. I like that a lot. So, Doug, did you have any favorite scene or a favorite line from the episode?
My favorite line is when they're skating on the beach, and then they're talking again about the baby and mentioning the dog and the goldfish.
Right.
It's all the same. I mean, you probably have it written down
It's,
verbatim. I don't know.
Dogs, goldfish, babies. It's all the same. Right, great idea until they've been there for a month in the house.
That was my favorite line.
I like that a lot. I also really did like when Karen just turned to Michael and said, "You need a bath." Right after having this very intense conversation about the new dynamics.
Well, again, it was just a very real moment.
Yeah,
that's just like, okay, would never do that nowadays in any kind of.
They would never take the time.
Yeah, they would it would all be so serious, right?
Yeah,
it'd just be like. It's not
I thought that scene in particular was handled so well, and it really touched my heart when she went through each of the children to say the qualities about them that she liked. So that was one of my favorite scenes. I also love the restaurant scene. It's just fun for, everybody to get out of the house in a real location. And then, again, I've already said this, the final scene on the cul-de-sac. I just loved all those bits and pieces with everybody. And even Richard and Laura having a little bit of fun there. And,
I like the scenes with Sid, too, with the kids.
Yeah.
Because I just don't feel like we've seen enough of that. So it's nice to see that, them going to the beach together. That was cool.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, and now we're coming in for a landing on this episode to get right down to the Lotus Point. We're going to find out on the brow meter just how highbrow or lowbrow this episode was. What did you think, Doug?
Wow, you're putting me on the spot. I'm going to say, now remember, the brow meter's 1 to 5. I'd like to give it a 4. What do you think?
I am in complete agreement with you.
Yes. Okay, finally. This has taken
every once in a while we get
10 episodes to get to in complete agreement.
Yeah, we are in complete agreement. This is a 4. Why? Because there really isn't much to bring it down. There's nothing really low.
No, I mean it was just a very good episode. It was well thought out, and it had issues that were real that people do need to deal with, especially in modern era. It's even probably more difficult here in America.
Can you imagine how this episode would play out now if, say, you weren't living in California?
Yeah, if you weren't living in California, you would have a whole nother set of dramas to deal with.
Right.
So,
I thought
still
it was
relevant to
it's relevant
modern
now,
day.
But it was also probably in a way groundbreaking at the time. So I just love the way they treated it, the core family of this show dealing with this. I thought it was really well done.
I think that was kind of cool too, in that, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen any television show discussing the fact that how the baby is going to affect everybody else. They just, usually it's just like, oh, they had a baby, everything is great.
Yeah.
Like there's no talk about like any of the downsides
the fact that
or
the children were not in agreement as well, and they each had a different perspective on it. I thought that was great, and I thought it was really nice. I think there might have been only maybe one opportunity missed in this, where maybe it would have been nice to see a conversation between Karen and one of her friends deeper.
Yeah, maybe like with Laura.
With Val, because Val was the one who had found out.
Yeah.
That would have been nice maybe, but in a way, you don't really need it. Like, they did such a good job. And so...
I mean, it happened all pretty
fast.
Yeah, pretty fast, compact. It was like, it's the next day, like they're at home, they're going to dinner. I mean, there probably wasn't even enough time to get it out to the neighbors. You know?
Closing out the episode this week, we would like to remind you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel or over on Spotify if that's where you're listening to us. You may also like individual episodes. Give us a little thumbs up. We also like engagement, right?
Love
Leave
engagement.
us comments or questions about the episode or any thoughts you might have had.
Or if you have any trivia.
Yes.
That's helpful too.
Yes.
We like it.
All right, Zug. So what's coming up next on Seaview Circle?
Coming up next on Seaview Circle, deeply in debt, Richard leans on his neighbors for some quick cash.
So a Richard episode finally.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
I love Richard, and I think that's good because it will kind of get this whole season very well-rounded. We're kind of getting a little bit of everybody.
Yeah, I'm digging it. All right, well, we will
see you then back on the sack.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye.